weaknesses and limitations actually be a doorway to something more? Let's talk about it with David Zahl on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we're so glad you're here. This is, if I'm in a different place, it looks that way, I'm in a different place. I'm at the Cove, the Billy Graham Training Center in the mountains of North Carolina, and it's a beautiful place, and I'm sitting in a cabin up on the side of a mountain that you have to take a long dirt road to get to, and yet, with modern technology, I get to be with my friends and with you guys, and we're glad you're here. You always have a place at our table. Matthew Porter, our executive producer, is here. Now and then, Matthew thinks of himself as a leader, and then he remembers half the time he can't even convince his family to go to his favorite restaurant.
The struggle is real.
Problem too. And our producer, Jinx, is working hard in his little glass booth.
Oh, yeah.
You said they canceled your monthly meeting of the Pessimist Club. What was that?
Yeah, I knew they'd do that.
Our director and one-man IT director.
He's next.
One-man IT department. John Myers is in his tech bunker. John says artificial intelligence will never take his job. It would be too smart for him to do that, which is true. And George Bingham, the president of Key Life, is on the road. He was with me at the Cove this last week, as was Kathy. And they are driving back today. And so we will miss his presence. And Kathy Wyatt is the soft feminine side of the program. Kathy, I understand you recently invented a new hot chocolate drink.
Oh. Did you discover that at the Cove?
No, I'm just reading what Matthew wrote.
Oh, my
Share
goodness.
the secrets.
Well, let me tell you, I'm not a coffee. I'll just tell you this really quickly. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I didn't pay attention to that little machine that dispenses coffee and cappuccino and all that kind of stuff. But then somebody told me that if you go all the way to the end, that there was hot chocolate. And I thought, well, it's cooler here, there in North Carolina. I mean, it's like 94 in Miami. It was like 68. I thought, well, this is hot chocolate weather. Well, guess what else they have? They have a frozen yogurt dispenser. So guess who put some frozen vanilla yogurt into their hot chocolate? Oh, my goodness. Ooh. I said it's a good thing I didn't discover this on Thursday night, or I would have had to waddle out of there because I would have done
Thomas
all
Edison.
day long. Oh, my gosh.
Did you bring the machine back?
I did not, but I think I know how to do it because I have an ice cream maker at home. Okay. So we'll try it one time.
We'll be over after the show.
After the show.
If that doesn't work, we'll foot the bill for you to get an ice cream maker.
Well, listen, and I tell you, I said to myself, you know what?
Like, yep.
If Steve doesn't do a good job here at the Cove this weekend, there's always hot chocolate and frozen yogurt. It's a win-win.
Hey, guys, we have one of my favorite people here with us, David Zahl. He's the founder and the director of Mockingbird Ministries. He's the editor-in-chief of Mockingbird blog, a co-host of the Mockingbird podcast, and he's written for Christianity Today and Washington Post. That was before he was a Christian. He also served on the staff of Christ Episcopal Church in Virginia. And his latest book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is Low Anthropology, the unlikely key to a gracious view of others and yourself. David, thank you for taking your time to be with us.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, Steve. I wouldn't miss a chance to give you a hard time in front of a lot of people.
Listen, let's start with that wedding ceremony. And then we're going to find out what low anthropology is. But that wedding ceremony blew me away. Tell us about it.
Well, it's something that a place in London called the School of Life devised a how to get married in the kind of post-religious age that doesn't seem to be just sentimentality. And has two people getting up there in front of a crowd. This man and a woman read first from, they do what's called the ritual of humility, and they read from their book of imperfections. And so the lady cracks open the book and says, I have trouble communicating my feelings maturely. And I assume that if you're mad, it's something I've done. And then the guy says, basically like, I sulk and get angry and wish you could read my mind. And then the whole crowd says, we have all been idiots and will be idiots again. The circumstances may vary, but we understand, and we are here to make you less lonely in your failings. And then you have a voiceover that says, this is important because the great enemy of love is self-righteousness.
Oh my!
And I found that to be true.
That's not a made up thing. That was a real ceremony, right?
No, I think it's a satirical thing, but maybe people have tried it. It's not.
It hits something.
Every time I've shown that clip, people laugh, and the older they are, the more they laugh. It's
oh man, so good. All right, let's get down. What in the world is low anthropology?
Low anthropology.
Anthropology for midgets, or is it low? What is it?
Well, this is the risk in writing a book with this title, because it's not. I don't using the word anthropology like a graduate course in about the rainforest tribes or something like that. An anthropology is simply what theologians and philosophers. It's the word they use to sort of refer to. Whatever your operating theory of human nature is. So everyone has something they mean when they say the phrase, I'm only human. That's your anthropology. So I have an anthropology, you have an anthropology. It's like a set of presuppositions or ideas about what it means to be human, what human beings are like, what we're good at, what we're not good at. High anthropology tends to be more optimistic about the human spirit. And a low anthropology is what I would call more sober. Some would say it's just more pessimistic is one way to put it, but it doesn't in any way discount acts of love and charity and goodness. But it says it's just as human to be full of doubt and longing and insecurity and grief and loss and sin as it is to be an image bearer who reaches out to the least of these in love. So a low anthropology is what I would call it, like a comprehensive view of human nature. And I think people's anthropologies, whether they're conscious of them or not, I think it creates all sorts of expectations in marriages, in just friendships, in our relationship with ourself, to say nothing of like our church and God. So.
And it affects everything.
Everything.
My friend Fred Smith said that everything that you believe about politics, about education, about religion, about philosophy is determined by your anthropology, what you think. And man, your book is profound. I'd like to get this in the hands of everybody I know, and I need to read it at least once a week.
Gosh.
Because, religious people get the disease and you can't help it. It just crawls up on you and you start proclaiming your goodness and how you can be like me if you just did some religious things. And that's going to kill us. It's going to kill our country. It's going to kill every relationship that we ever have. Has the book been out long enough for you to start to get responses?
The book came out today. So
you don't know.
Check your inbox.
I've heard from some people who say that they feel every single page makes them feel better and that they feel, a deeper appreciation, a feeling that they're not alone in their limitations and their weaknesses and their, self-centeredness or what have you. But I'm sure that I'm going to get some pushback and say, oh, this is kind of gloomy or pessimistic. But, Steve, I mean, I'm convinced, and that I wrote the book because I think that in fact, the weakness and limitation are actually the pathway to compassion and unity and love, and not to say nothing of God. Like those who, what is it Jesus says? Those who are well have no need of a doctor. Jesus came not to call the righteous, but sinners. And so this is a book that is really meant to mine and unearth and expose the way that our operating theories of human nature, some of which we've sort of swallowed unintentionally, and some of which we've consciously adopted, have in fact informed or infected or maybe shaped our view of other people. Because if you expect people to be what they cannot be, you're going to start to hate them pretty soon, I think.
Yeah.
And that goes.
And if you can come to the realization that you can't be that either, then we can talk. Maybe.
maybe.
Boy,
Savior, and you're not him.
You talk about a well-timed book in our cancel culture of self-righteousness. This is a book that should be read by everybody. Low Anthropology, the unlikely key to a gracious view of others and yourself. David Zahl is the author of this book, and he doesn't just write about it, he lives it. And I've watched him in so many places. So this is the real deal. If you're real deal, if you're a cynical old preacher like me, you need this book. Hey, thanks for being with us. We're talking with David Zahl, and his book is called Low Anthropology. And you say what? Well, if you'll listen, you're going to learn stuff that will change your life. Subtitle is The Unlikely Key to a Gracious View of Others and Yourself.
David, reading your book, it reminded me of a conversation I had with our oldest son not even a week ago. He's just learning tackle football, which is a whole new game from flag football. And he's getting really frustrated because it's a lot to learn. And I asked him, I'm like, if you had a player on your team and he wasn't getting it immediately and it was taking him a little longer, would you be tough on that kid? And he goes, no, I wouldn't. I would be understanding. I said, okay, then you're that kid. You need to take it easy on yourself. And then, of course, God goes, is that conversation for him or for you? I'm like, damn, gummit, parenting, teaching me lessons again, just out of the radar.
You teach yourself a lesson.
I'm like, dang it. He just went stealth on that one. So this idea of perfection, of expectations, how does that factor into this idea of a low anthropology?
Well, I think that what it does is it gives away the fact that we do not have a low anthropology. We have culturally and in the church and elsewhere, we have I think our default is, and that's what the Garden of Eden tells me, our default is a high anthropology of thinking too much of ourselves. And so, but the way that works out right now in the culture is you hear the phrase burnout a lot. People are burned out, which means they're being asked to do more than they can possibly do for longer than they can possibly do it. And there's a sense of like paralysis that develops, or even almost a sense of betrayal at every layer of society. This is kind of true. So, perfection in that sense is simply a nonstop treadmill like demand on you. But then you have the sort of expectation that you need to not just sort of do everything, you need to know everything. and be certain about we're at a time of immense certainty, and there's not a lot of humility. And we do that, I think, partly because we're so exhausted, and it's easier to be certain about things than to sort of interrogate yourself. But then we also feel like we have to not only know everything and do everything, we have to care about everything. And so in the world, and whether it's left, right, center, whatever the discourse is on social media, you're under a lot of pressure today, I think, to demonstrate that you care about everything in the right way, and you need to let everyone know that. And so all of that sort of combines into this juggernaut of demand and burnout, and where people are also there's a high anthropology that grinds us down, because there's no grace inherent. There's no forgiveness. There's no space given to our humanity in that respect. There's no, in Christianity, we have the expectation of the law that is met with the promise of the gospel, which is the forgiveness of sin and the blood of Christ. In a cultural context, you just have basically just keep trying even harder, or convince people, hide even more, whatever it is, wherever you're venting your lack of perfection. And that creates a pretty unsustainable, and I think miserable, to say nothing of like lonely situation. So low anthropology is, I think, while it sounds gloomy, it's a breath of fresh air to people who feel like they have to do it all, know it all, and care about it all.
Oh man. Kind of makes you feel sorry for the people in our culture recording. I remember one of news commentators commented that Wood, the golfer, after he had fallen, was a Buddhist, and they had no view of redemption. And he said, I don't know where somebody like that goes when they've screwed up that bad. And he was saying something quite profound. Yeah, there's a sense in which there is a cultural Buddhism that covers our nation, and you just described it. You just described the hell and the darkness of that sort of thing, because it's built on a lie, isn't it?
It's built on a lie that we're gods and not creatures. We're creators and not creatures. And that's the lie that is inherent right at the heart of the Christian anthropology, which is not just that we are sinners, but that we're also creatures, that we're sort of, so there's, people would say, is this book translating original sin into sort of cultural terminology? It's not that. A biblical anthropology is not just sin, because sin doesn't make sense outside of a sense of fallenness. It's that you are both finite and a creature with firm limits. You need to sleep 8 hours or 6 hours a day, and eat food and oxygen and all that stuff. And then the second pillar, which I call the second pillar of a low anthropology, is that your willpower is limited as well, and that you're often in conflict, like what you want to do and what you should do, or what different parts of you want to do, and it's never that clear cut. And then, yes, there is the sort of ineluctable dark side of the human creature, which seems to be, you cannot look at human history, to say nothing of yourself, without some sense of, if you don't have that piece, well, then you think, I'm the only one whose internal monologue looks this dark, But what we find out, I think, as Christians, is that no, that's the lot, that's the world that Christ came to save. That's at least how I see it.
So true. That's good stuff. It's just so important that we get Kathy.
David, my question, I was going to zero in a little bit on the pillars, and you kind of touched on that already, but what happens to us individually and then to our relationships with others when we adopt a low anthropology view?
Well, I think when we have a low anthropology, we start to believe that the other person's actually as real as we are, and subject to the same limitations, conflictedness, doubleness, and sin that we are. So we don't immediately assume that they're a different type of person, either a much better person or a much more sane person. In fact, we begin from the standpoint that they're crazy in certain ways that make them insufferable, but also gifted in ways that make them, beautiful. but that they are not a wholly other species that I have to separate myself from. So I think we find that we can connect with other people, especially at their point of weakness, knowing that there's always a point of weakness. And if you view people as just sort of ironclad example paragons of virtue, or as absolute villains and possessed by hatred, then you're going to just divide into ever smaller categories. A low anthropology, I think, builds a broader consensus, but it builds it on the basis of shared weakness, limitation, and conflict.
Oh, such good stuff. Listen, if you're contemplating tearing down a statue because the person it represents did really bad things, you got a problem, because you can't find anybody to replace that statue who isn't exactly like the person who was represented in the first place. Guys, you don't want to miss a word of this. This is so important, so profound, and so timely. So if you turn off the radio or quit watching, you'll get the fever and die. We're talking about David Zahl. By the way, you can keep up with David and his work with Mockingbird at mbird.com and on Twitter at Mockingbird, MIN. David, what's why do you call it Mockingbird?
Well, it's I believe that we have one message to get out there, and we say it over and over again, like a mockingbird. And our message is the sort of song of God's grace, which people who are, frankly, defined by the low anthropology, or at least recognized by it, never ever outrun their need to hear the word of absolution and pardon and forgiveness that we hear in the death and resurrection of Jesus. So that's why we call it Mockingbird.
I like it. Because of my shame, I never asked, because I figured everybody knew except me.
Well, I like it because it means when someone asks, I can kind of, explain.
That's true.
The gospel or the low anthropology. It's all that stuff. Because, Christians have a way of, Christianity has a low anthropology if you view people as in need of forgiveness and in need of a savior. But what we do is once someone becomes a Christian, I call it a selectively high anthropology. We just pump air into that anthropology until all of a sudden, the longer you're a Christian or the more you spend time in church, you realize, wait a second, I came here because I needed God. And all of a sudden, I just feel like I'm failing it again, or I'm falling down a new ladder. And that's how this low anthropology stuff comes into the church. We believe that Christians remain, that we will never not need Jesus, and in fact, when you talk to someone anytime I've read interviews with someone like Billy Graham or Mother Teresa, at the end of their life, they didn't sound like they thought they were higher on a ladder. It sounded like they were more convinced of their own smallness and therefore the bigness, the largeness of God. So low anthropology is, trying to put fresh words around that reality.
It seems like the idea of low anthropology could also connect us in a new way to Jesus, because I know personally, I have that higher anthropology of myself. I'm like, I just want to glide through life being efficient and just with an elegance. And instead I wake up and I find myself the guy that my wife asks 4 times a week, what is on your shirt? And like, it's mustard or toothpaste one. You're like, I'm not the guy I want to be. And it actually talking, it reminds me of a long time ago. I'm not going to do the math. A Joan Osborne song, "What If God Was One of Us?" And it was written in
long time ago.
It's a mocking kind of thing, but they accidentally stumbled into some truth, and it's the chorus is, "What if God was one of us, just a slob like one of us, just a stranger on a bus trying to make his way back home?" And you're like, you don't get it, Joan. He was one of us. He's undoubtedly at some point ate food and it dropped on the floor, and so with this low anthropology, you're like, Jesus lived in that. He never sinned, but he had these physical limitations that we do. It feels like it could bring us full circle to understanding God on a deeper level, because he understands our human experience on that same level.
Yeah, if we really believe, and I think that it's in all the creeds, and it's absolutely the truth of the matter is that Jesus was both fully God and fully man, then yes, God is not somehow detached and aloof from what it's like to be you. You with not just your strengths and your accomplishments, but you when you think no one's looking. And that's where that's where the message of the gospel and the person and figure of Jesus just comes alive. It's not at our place of proudest, our best day. It's on our worst days, and I also think that that's how relationships with other people work. I mean, the fact that it works that way with other people just sort of sheds deeper light on the fact that this is the truth at the center of the universe, is that love is forged in vulnerability, whatever you want to call it, weakness, failure, and sin, rather than apart from it. Apart from it, you just have respect and admiration, but you don't have love. Grace is the reason it's so captivating is because no one on this planet, they might be able to lie to themselves for a little while, but no one on this planet lives a life that is exempt from the need for forgiveness or grace. At some point, the chinks in the armor are going to show, and it might not just be mustard on your shirt. You might rip that thing to shreds by mistake. It's so anyway, that's where I'm putting all my hope as someone who feels very recognized by the biblical anthropology. I therefore find my hope in the biblical answer, which is Jesus, what I would call high Christology.
High Christology and low anthropology. Man, it's the key. And it's sad that so many people, even religious people, don't see that. And the canceled culture, you got to be careful about what you say, what you do, what you think. And as a result, we don't say anything and we don't do anything. We don't have relations. Hey, listen, you got to get a copy of this book. It's a life-changing book. Low Anthropology by David Zahl. And by the way, stay with us because we're coming back just like Jesus. Hey, thanks for joining us. Hey, just a reminder, October the 17th, for the first time ever, we're going to record this show in front of a live audience here in Central Florida. I have a new book coming out, and I'm going to keep doing it till I get it right. And we're going to record this program. We'd love for you to be there. And if you're in driving distance, go to keylife.org and you can get some information on it. David, as you know, I love your father. I can't tell you what his ministry has meant to me. It encouraged me. It told me I could keep doing what I was doing when everybody else was telling me I was ugly and my mother's dress was funny. But I know your father, who is a brilliant scholar, one of the kindest and most gentle men in the world, who spoke grace in places that ticked people off. And he ticked a lot of people off. I get that too. And you get it too at Mockingbird. What is with that? What makes him so angry?
I think people get angry anytime they think you're trying to take something from them. And so in this case, you're trying to take righteousness, or you're trying to undermine their efforts. It almost reveals how hard people are white knuckling the sort of life of the Christian. Well, you can almost measure it, how miserable they are doing it by how upset they get when they and I only know this because I can do it. I'm a Christian too. And, you think I've been at this for years. Surely I am better than so-and-so. Surely I am a little higher along. I am a little closer to God. And, it could, that anytime someone is trying to undermine that, you get defensive, you get upset, especially if you feel like you've really worked hard for that. And no one wants you to take something that they feel they deserve. And so if you're caught up in a calculus of deserving, you're going to react and often with anger, sometimes with sadness, but usually with anger, and try to silence the messenger. Now, that said, I mean, I watched my dad provoke people in ways that maybe weren't always in his best interest, but I think he was right. I think this low anthropology message, some people will hear it as the best, as incredible news. They'll feel their shoulders unknot, and they will be like, they feel like they can breathe. They can breathe as a Christian. They can breathe as a human being, as a person. Some people will hear it and think, this sounds too dark, or this doesn't take into account how hard I've been working. And surely I deserve a little bit of a leg up over those people who really don't get it. I'm a part of the solution, and they're a part of the problem. And if you're in that mindset, which is a very human mindset, and I fall into it all the time, well, then you will be resentful when someone says, no, in fact, that person who you dislike so much, you're 2 bad days away from that person, or you are, you have that same inclination. It's just in a different place. You have it within yourself to do those things, or whenever you hear someone say, how on earth could so-and-so do such a thing? And you want to say the same way you could, when you're blinded by self-justification and sin. It's not a stretch. But again, I think that tears walls down rather than builds fresh ones. And and unfortunately, I don't think Christians are known for that sort of behavior. And yet it's all right there in the message of our founder and, the Bible and the New Testament witness, to say nothing of Steve Brown. I mean, all I need to do is listen to you.
That's new to me. That's profound. I'm going to think about that. We're trying to take away. People get angry when you take away things from them. And when you try to take away their right,
something they think they deserve.
I've wondered for years. That explains it. I think you're right on about that. I can think of times when that's been expressed exactly that way. I've worked hard for this, and I've loved Jesus, and I put the world behind me and the cross in front of me, and it's been hard. And you're telling me it doesn't matter? All of a sudden, I get their anger.
You're also telling people that they're not really in control of as much as they think they're in control of. Yeah. And people don't like being they'll do anything they can. Just go to an airport, to watch what people do when personal control is challenged. Yet I think our addiction to personal control is a huge element of our low anthropology, and it tends not to bear good fruit in our lives or the lives of our, in our relationships. Surrender and, putting another person first and charity, these things bear beautiful fruit, but they're usually born out of a smallness of self rather than a increasingly grasping for more and more and more. So yeah, anytime you're challenging what people think they deserve or their sense of control or their religious system of sort of like to know where they stand according to such and such a person, that's going to get people's backs up real fast. And unfortunately, religion and Christianity in particular, for whatever reason, tends to attract people that are looking for God to be in control of God. In fact, and what we're saying is that God's actually in control. He's the one who's the mercy giver and the forgiver and the grace giver. And it's not actually your job to be the judge. And people don't like that. I want it to be within my description to actually be God. And that's the core diagnosis, I think, of what it means. And yet anyone we've met in our lives who's got some serenity, some sense of holiness, and who we would say actually does seem to be closer to God, usually those are people whose sense of dependence upon God has forced them into that position. And they've, for whatever reason, the Holy Spirit is active and allowing them to receive whatever gifts come their way rather than constantly clutch what they've been given tighter and tighter, because whoever is given, will be taken away, and whoever is, all that Christ language about to whom much is given, much is expected. I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
David, that's so good. I don't know what happened to this hour. I mean, it's over before it started.
Well, thanks for having me.
But listen, read this book. Actually, self-awareness is a lot easier, less work than self-righteousness. And once you learn that, this is the way to go. And this book could change your life. David, I love what you do. I love Mockingbird. I love your family. And now I love this book. You keep writing. We'll keep talking.
Thank you, Steve, so much.
Bless you, brother. Guys, once again, don't forget the name of the book. It's Low Anthropology, the unlikely key to gracious view of others and yourself. And we're going to come back for a short time and tell you who we're going to do this unto next week. And it's somebody really, really big. Famous, world-renowned.
Like David.
Like David.
Right. Spare me.
Don't go away. Oh man, what a great hour with David Zahl. I love him and I love his family and his mom and dad and brothers, and they have been faithful to this message of grace. I said that it's a lot harder and more work to be self-righteous than it is to be self-aware. And that is true. And I've been teaching here at the Cove, the Graham Center, that I felt that we were close to an awakening in America. And people are saying to me, "You're crazy. Are you out of your mind? We're not close to an awakening." Yeah, we are, because we're running out of answers and hope. You can only do self-righteousness for so long before you hit a wall. And that wall is very painful. You can't participate in a canceled culture without getting canceled yourself somewhere down the road. You can't be arrogant and prideful when you're not, because you can't fake it that long. And when you reach the end of yourself as a culture or as a person, and there's no other place to go, then Jesus is it. And I think Christians like David, and I might say like his father, and I might say like Key Life Network, we've got the answer. We're not smart or good looking or sophisticated, but we have the answer. And it's a lot more wonderful than you think it is. As my mentor said, cheer up. You're a lot worse than you think you are. But cheer up. God's grace is a lot bigger than you think it is. And it really is. And this book that David has written is simply another and wonderful way of proclaiming that message. So if you can't get along with your mother-in-law, buy this book. If your preacher is driving you nuts, buy this book. If I irritate you, buy this book. And if you write me, I'll read it again. Okay, Kathy, who's going to be next week?
I do. Next week, our friend Chris Denbeston is going to be with us. We had him on a few months back, and we talked about a book that he had written. But actually, prior to that book, he wrote a book. It's titled Grayson's Song, which is just an amazing story about his daughter. And I mean, it'll just send chills right up your back. It's amazing, amazing story.
And the lessons that he learned.
And the lessons they learned. And
it's going to be a great time, and you sure want to be here. And we hope you will be. Same time, same place next week. And between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide, wide berth.